Hi and welcome to another Essential Lightroom video. In this tutorial we're going to take a look at how we can emulate some old film stock, and then specifically we're going to be looking at the Illford Pan F Plus 50 style. As you can see, the image in front of us at the moment has had this particular preset applied to it. It has a very flat dynamic range to it, and it gives a really nice sort of retro kind of feel. So I'm going to take you step by step through how to do this. We've also made this effect available as a Lightroom preset. The link to that is in the description below. But if you'd like to learn how to create this effect step by step for yourself, stick around and I'm going to take you through the entire process right now. So this is a starting point for our preset effect. Now we're going to go through and we're going to edit this. So the first thing we need to do is jump over the develop module and make sure that we've got the basics panel open. Once we've done that, we're going to switch this over to black or white so we can start working with this in the most optimal method for creating black and white images. So we'll hit black and white, that converts it over. We're now going to make some sort of slight alterations to the image itself to make sure we get the best result from where most of this effect is carried out, and that's inside the tone curve. So first of all, we want to grab the contrast and we're going to drag that down. We want to kind of flatten the image out a little bit. So we're going to drag that down to about -20. That just flattens the tone in the image. Then we're going to grab the shadows, the highlights, and so on, and make some adjustments in there. So we're going to grab the shadows, we're going to drag that down. We want to flatten those shadows out. Around the 30 mark is pretty good. We want to bump the whites up this time. So we're just going to push those up to mid-30s. And we're going to bring the blacks down. So realistically what we're doing is we're kind of trying to get some nice basics in there for some tone differences. So you can see that's where we are now. That's what we started off with. So we've already got a nice looking black and white image, but now we're going to jump over the tone curve, and like I say, this is where most of the alterations are going to be taken through. So let's do that. So let's just jump over into the tone curve, and we're making sure that we're in the linear point mode. So it means that we can adjust each of the points that we want to create and add to this tone curve very quickly and easily. If you're not in this mode, all you need to do is click this little symbol in the right hand corner of the panel and it'll switch you between the two different versions of the tone curve. So now we've done that, we're ready to start adding some points in there and start tweaking this image. So the more time you spend editing images in Lightroom, the more you'll realize that the tone curve is incredibly powerful and probably one of the most powerful tools in the entire toolbox that you've got in Lightroom. So with that in mind, we're going to go through and we're going to make a more complex than usual adjustment to our image. So we're going to add a couple of extra points in there. For this example, I'm going to add 4 extra points in. Now to start off with, it doesn't really matter too much where I add those. I just want to add those points in. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start tweaking this. First thing we're going to do is crush those blacks. So we're going to grab the black point in the bottom left hand corner and we're going to lift that up. We're going to crush those quite heavily. You can see now the blacks, instead of being black, start to take on more of a grey effect and kind of gives us a sort of pseudo-negative effect to the black areas in the image. So we're going to just tweak some of the other parts of this now. We're going to deal with the shadow and darker information to start off with, and then we'll tweak just ever so gently the lighter points, because most of this edit is all in those mid-tones and the darker areas. So what we're going to do is we're going to lock the mid-tone. So we're going to grab that point, go to the middle point, and we're going to lock that to around about its base point, which is exactly in the middle. So we'll leave that where it is. We're going to grab these other couple of points. We're going to start making some slight adjustments. So these are all fairly subtle, but they're going to build up to give a really good effect. So you can see we're just adjusting this darker information in the image. By lifting it up, we're sort of boosting it, we're making it lighter. By dragging it down, we're making it darker. So like I say, we're just fine-tuning and finessing this image to get close to that Ilford effect that you would have got from the old film stock. Next up, we're going to come up to the white, which is the lightest point in the entire image, and we're going to drop that down. So we're going to crush those whites a little bit, so it'll flatten those out and give them a slightly grey tone, which, like I say, was indicative of what the film would have looked like. And we're just going to tweak ever so slightly the highlights. And that's pretty good. That's pretty much where I want it to be. Maybe a couple of little tiny tweaks. That's looking pretty good. So let's take a look at before and take a look at after. So you can see there's quite a considerable difference in there. When you start to build these points up, you can really change the tonal information in the image. Well, that's pretty much the basis of this effect. Next thing we want to do is add some grain in there to make sure we have more of a sort of grainy film look. Now obviously if your image to start off with was shot at a high ISO in low light and you already have grain, then you can kind of bypass this effect. You don't need to add this in there. But this image was shot in daytime, so there's not really any noise in there, and we want to give it some characteristics of noise. So adding grain in Lightroom is very, very easy. All we need to do is come down to the effects panel, open that up, and you can see we've got the option for adding grain, and we've got 3 different sliders you can work with: the amount, the size, and the roughness. Now these are great ways of creating more realistic looking noise in your image as opposed to the digital noise that you can get from modern digital cameras. So what we're going to do is we're going to just make some adjustments in there. We're going to take the grain up, not even just jump in so we're at 100% so we can see exactly what we're working with. So you can see the image already has a tiny amount of grain, but we're going to start to accentuate that. So we're going to drag the amount up, and we're going to take that to about 30, which is a decent amount of noise. And you can see once we do that, we start to introduce film grain or noise into the image. Now we can start tweaking this if we want to make sure we can get the effect that we really like, to get it sort of close to the natural effect as we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the size to adjust the size of the actual grain itself. I'm going to bring that down to about 15, so it's going to make it slightly smaller. And then the roughness we're going to boost up to about 75. And that gives us a nice grain, film grain kind of look to the image itself. So let's take a look at before and take a look at after. So you can see it has quite a natural looking film grain effect. And let's just zoom back out, and that's pretty much the effect in action. Okay, so before we wrap this video, there's one more thing I want to do. I want to make a little tweak to the image itself. I'm going to come back to the basics panel, and I want to bring the clarity down. I want to reduce some of that contrast between the light and the dark areas in the image. Now nothing much, just a slight tweak. I'm going to bring this down to about -10, somewhere around there. And that just kind of just deals with some of the issues in the image where the contrast is a little too high for my liking. And there we go, that's it. That's how we're going to emulate that Ilford film stock. So if you'd like to grab the preset, the link is in the description below, and you can get to this point with one simple click. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and smash that subscribe button to be kept up to date with all of the new content we add every single week. If you have any comments, questions or feedback, please pop those in the comment section below, and until next time, take care.